Hello everybody and welcome to another Shadow Zone video. This one is, well, a long time coming, to be honest, because I've been trying to build a single stage to anywhere vehicle for, well, weeks, to be honest. And yeah, this is the current iteration, the Starchaser SSTA, and let's see how it performs. The plan is actually to get into orbit, get to Minmus, mine some ore, refine that ore, and then we'll have enough Delta V to basically get anywhere in the Kerbal solar system. Okay, now at that beautiful sunrise we are also rising up into the atmosphere. We have 4 Rapier engines, 1 nuclear engine, a tiny, the small refinery version, 2 small drills, and hopefully enough solar panels and fuel cells to keep that thing running. But first, the most important thing, and probably the hardest, is to get off of Kerbin. So we're already blazing through the atmosphere, heating up nicely, so Dunning Kerman, whatever, he's got it quite warm in the cockpit now. Okay, we're out of the atmosphere, look at that, there's the moon. And then we're going to circularize, of course, and well, before we do that we have to extend our solar panels, because the Rapier engines are one of the few engines in Kerbal Space Program that don't provide any electricity generation. So once again, firing those thingies. And well, the next target is, of course, Minmus. And we already are quite in a good position for that. So first using up all my oxidizer, and then switching to the nuclear engine. We're already getting closer to our Minmus rendezvous. This looks like a good encounter. And while we drift through space, our tiny little pilot has something to think about while traveling years, maybe, in the future through space in just a tiny cockpit. Oh well, you have to do some sacrifices when you have to calculate a little bit less weight. Okay, we're going to land on that flat region there. So Minmus is really easy to land on because it has such low gravity. Even just 1 nuclear engine and this amount of weight is quite enough to land there nicely. Look at that, just gently touching down on the tips of the fins, or wings, whatever you want to call them, and falling down into the correct orientation for takeoff. That went well. Since the small ISRU unit generates a lot of heat, I also have a radiator. First I'm going to generate some oxygen so my fuel cells can work, while I then will generate some regular liquid fuel. And this of course takes some time, as you can see here in this montage. Once we've done that, we retract everything we don't need. Of course, we have some science equipment on board as well. And now comes the tricky part, because this is basically ice skating at deadly velocities. Okay, we're pitching up a bit so we don't hit the engine on the ground, but this looks good. Adjusting our inclination so we don't have a too steep orbit. Starchaser firing forward, and of course, since Minmus is so easy to get back up from again, we also get a nice stable orbit. And then, well, off to our next target. You see me here using Transfer Window Planner, the mod, and we're going to Duna. And once we waited a few days, I mentioned before, the Kerbal will have to endure a lot of time in that tiny cockpit of his. Once we have done that, we're going to fire our nuke engine again, And well, this takes some time since it's just one nuke and quite a lot of weight. But in the end, as you can see here, I got a nice Duna encounter. Perfect. And then it's time to say goodbye to Minmus and of course Kerbin, since we're now going into interplanetary space. The Starchaser living up to his name, if you count planets as stars, that is. Okay, you can see Duna in the background already. What I'm going to try here is using my aerodynamic capabilities of the Starchaser to get an orbit around that planet, so we don't have to use our engine. Also called, in short, aerobraking. So in order to do that, of course, we retract everything that could burn off in the atmosphere during that maneuver. You've seen that the trajectories mod projected I won't get an orbit, but since it does not calculate whether or not you're using a steep angle of attack, that means how much you pitch up during your traveling through the atmosphere. Well, there you go. I got a great stable orbit around Duna, and I already got an Ike encounter. In order to not lose that, I'm going to fire my engine a little bit during my atmospheric transition. And I'm also staying in the prograde vector, so I don't lose that much of speed. Okay, now we're out of the atmosphere and perfect. We got an Ike encounter, we got a Duna flyby, we got a beautiful view of Ike and Duna. This makes for a great desktop background. And then it's time to get to Ike. Let's see if Ike provides us with enough resources that we can refill this thing. Okay, but before we can do that, of course, we have to get in an orbit around Ike, and then after we do that, we have to land on it. Okay, this is quite easy, to be honest, since Ike is not that big of a challenge. Actually, this is a premiere for me. I have never landed on Ike before. I'm playing this game since 2015 and I've never landed on Ike. Would you believe that? Okay, I've made another orbit so I would land on the daytime side. Nuke engine has enough thrust to weight ratio so I can get back down on the surface. Okay, this is a bit finicky and I really don't want to destroy anything, so I really have to be careful. Oh, that's not as gentle as the Minmus landing was, but oh well. We are in a stable parking position, once again refueling to get back on with it. And we're already on a steep hill, which is good because this will make taking off a lot easier. And while the days pass, the fuel tanks fill up with precious liquid fuel, and of course the radiator gets enough work to do. So let's get on with it. Let's just use only the nuclear engine until we have a better position to take off. And try not to crash. This looks promising. Firing also my rapiers for extra thrust. And yes, we are off of Ike. Now it's just a matter of gaining enough altitude and then of course circularizing around that little tiny moon. I don't know why I always believe that Ike is made up of iron or something. Look at that! One of my favorite celestial spectacles, an Ike clips. As I mentioned before, I always think that Ike is made out of iron or something. First of all, because it looks kind of metallic, if you know what I mean. And also the name Ike with the I in front, I don't know. I always think it's made up of iron. Okay, what's next? Well, since we are now filled to the brim with more fuel, let's try to head even further out of the solar system, which means going to Joule. And well, my plan is actually to land on Laythe, so this is going to be fun. Goodbye, Ike. First of all, I'm going to head to an orbit around Duna, because I want to use Duna's gravity to assist me to get to Jewel, which is also called the Oberth effect. First of all, we got another stable orbit around Duna, and then we plan our transfer to Jewel, which was a bit of finagling with the maneuver nodes, but I'm going to spare you that in this video. In the end, we managed to get our encounter with Jewel. Well, almost. I had to do some adjustments further on in my orbit, but in the end, look at that, a nice Jewel encounter. And yeah, once we traveled another, well, I think 400 or 500 days, it was quite a lot of time, I encountered the Jewel planetary system and its 5 beautiful moons. In order to continue, I thought I would try to get a Tylo encounter, which I did. Tylo is great for getting captured around Jewel, as you can see here. The closer I get to it, when going in front of it, the closer I get around Jewel. And I'm going to get a Laythe encounter as well, I think, if I plan this right. First of all, let's adjust our inclination a bit so we are in the same plane as Tylo and of course also Val and Laythe. Bob and Paul are out of the question at the moment. Oh well, this looks okay. And then we got our Laythe encounter later on when we adjust our orbit at Apoapс. Great stuff. And also a beautiful scenery. I always like coming to Jewel because it looks so great. One pass around Tylo. Goodbye, Tylo. I'm not trying to land on you. I don't have enough thrust-to-weight ratio. Well, at least with the nuclear engine. I think the Rapiers would manage fine, but I probably don't have enough fuel, and then I don't have enough fuel to get back somewhere else, and yeah, that would be not so great. Okay. We're now performing our Apoapс burn, so we get our encounter with Laythe. And this is looking... yes! Great! And it looks like we won't need much delta V to get a stable orbit around Laythe. You've seen that the trajectory is already very much curved, so there won't be enough energy required to get into a stable orbit there. Hello, Laythe! Looking good! Well, since I don't want to spend an entire tank of fuel on getting circularized, I'm going to try to use your atmosphere. Let's hope we don't burn up in there. And while we enjoy once again the view, let's try to not die. We're already in the upper... now we're already in the upper atmosphere, and at once we're trying to... well, once we're burning, some heating occurring here. And of course we are now in a fine capture. And well, this looks like I'm going to crash somewhere in the sea, probably. I think I'm going to try to adjust that orbit later on so I don't plunge that hard, because since Laythe is mainly made up of water, it could be a bit hard to plan your landing if you just rely on air braking and you don't know which landmass will or will not be at the place where you're going to land. I'm trying to get a stable orbit over here, so we're going to do that air brake once again, but with a bit lower speed. But as you can see here, as luck would have it, I already was above some bigger landmass. And then I tried to make my air brake a bit more aggressive. Which meant not only pitching up, but also moving to the side like the space shuttle did during the re-entry. It kind of flew circles or something. This is basically power sliding at hypersonic speeds through fire. We got enough land over there, so let's try to really take down that speed. And yes, this looks okay. We are going to land over there. Perfect. So we're not expanding any fuel. And we're going to land, and then we are hopefully going to refuel our tanks. I've activated the rapier, so if necessary I could perform some powered landing. But look at that. This is worth all the effort. This is why I play Kerbal Space Program. Well, at least a modded version of Kerbal Space Program, so you can have clouds and scattering and whatever. But in the end, I really would like to see worlds like that. You know, this is one of my biggest dreams, like ever, to kind of one day get into space and view something like that. It probably would never happen, but well, you can dream. We're now on our descent. This looks okay. We have enough wing area so we can hopefully perform a safe glide to the ground. Oh yes, this looks good. Let's try to reduce our vertical speed. Yes, ooh, yes. Great landing! Well, not like one of my previous attempts, as you may recall, during Jab Lost His Keys. Okay, let's stop over here. Let's extend everything we need and let's start drilling. Fuel cells activated, and here we go. Yeah. Okay, since this is quite a hospitable planet, Duna Kerman decided to stretch his legs after years in confinement. I think he has deserved it. Okay, but let's get back in there and let's get back home. We've been in space way too long. So once again, retracting everything that could break, and action! Picking up speed, pitching up, and yes! Look at that. Beautiful. I always activate the context menu for my engines during ascent from an SSTA, so I can see how the thrust value performs. Once again, a beautiful scenery with Jewel in the background and some purple little clouds. This is of course the standard environmental visual enhancement mod, and also Scatterer for some additional goodies. Nice. Duna Kerman also enjoying the scenery. Since this is an SSTA capable to getting up from Kerbin, of course Laythe is not really a problem, since its atmosphere is a lot, well, it's not as high as Kerbin, and also the gravity is a bit lower, so it's a lot easier to get back into space. On the other hand, you have to really keep an eye on your thrust to weight ratio, on, well, depending on how high you are, because otherwise you will burn up. But we have avoided that in this instance, and now since we're back up in space we can perform our circularization burn. And then of course it is time to, well, fire a bit. There we go. Now we are stable in a safe orbit around Laythe. And now we've done that, we're going to plan our return to Kerbin. Problem is, this will take a lot of Delta V. Well, this is going to be interesting. Maybe I get some gravity assists. I tried to get some gravity assist from Tylo, but that in this case, how the constellations were, I would have been ejected out of the solar system. but in the end I would not get any Kerbin encounter. But I managed to do, well, at least something right, because I got my Kerbin encounter. But then I also had to do some adjustment later on. So here we go, this looks okay. This is at least an encounter, but we're not really happy with that yet, because I really want to get close to the atmosphere to maybe use it to increase my braking powers. And while we say goodbye to Jewel, we also found another maneuver node where we could perform a better encounter with Kerbin. Problem is, well, even with that encounter, we're going to need at least 1,000 meters per second of delta V to perform a stable orbit, and I only have 1200 left. I have to use about 150 to get that encounter at all, and I need 1,000 or a bit more to perform the circularization. Well, not circularization, to capture. That's when I thought, let's just try aerobraking. And yeah, as you may have guessed, this did not turn out that well, because yeah, I went in way too steep and everything exploded. Then I made a really stupid mistake, which was not hitting record during my retrograde burn. Yeah, so we're right after our burn, and I had 18 meters per second left and only 9 units of fuel, which was cutting it really close. I'm actually quite embarrassed that I did not record that, but yeah, as you've seen before, it is entirely possible, and you're welcome to try it out and download the craft file in the description. And if you want, I can also provide you with a quick save file when I was still at Ike. Okay, so we are now performing some more aerobraking maneuvers, and also I found out I still had some ore left, which I did not have before, so in the end it turned out fine, because I had some 20 meters per second that were added thanks to the refinery. But luckily I did not need them, I just adjusted my orbits a little bit so I could do some more aerobraking, which we're doing here. The goal is to get kind of a circular orbit around Kerbin, then find a nice place to land and, yeah, land. At least that was the plan. In the end, it will turn out that it went a bit, well, different than I expected. Once again performing a little bit of a burn, so I would get almost a circular orbit. This was, as I mentioned before, the plan. Problem is, I went a bit too steep, and yeah. This meant I had to land somewhere here in the dark. In maybe water. I really hoped it would not be water in the end, but let's see where this goes. I also really don't like nighttime landings, because you can't really see that well where you're going to end up. Once again doing our sideways thing, and you can see land down there. If you look really hard, there is land. So this is why I'm doing this aggressive braking maneuver. Really trying to put the entire surface of the vehicle into my retrograde orbit so that the braking effect is maxed out, and also trying to not kill my pilot since the cockpit is heating up quite a lot. This looks okay. We're now quite above a nice flat landmass. Well, now it's only a question of nailing the landing only. Since we managed to land on Laythe without a hitch, I think I can manage to do this on Kerbin as well, as long as the terrain is not too, well, rugged. Okay, we got our landing lights, which provide some illumination, flaring up, and... yes! Whew! I was a bit worried there, but in the end it turned out fine. And after many years in space, after visiting Minmus, after visiting Duna, after visiting Ike, after a Tylo flyby, after a Joule flyby, and after a landing on Laythe, and quite some time in interplanetary space, we're finally back home. So this was quite the adventure, and our pilot is now finally able to feel the grip of real gravity of the breeze of his home planet on his face if he would open the visor. As always, if you like what you've seen here, please subscribe if you didn't already. So, thanks for watching, goodbye.